Welcome to Artbeat, Canada's Art Pulse. I'm your host, Katie. Today, we're excited to speak with Emily Pope, a Toronto-based artist celebrated for her captivating exploration of womanhood and the essence of the human condition. We'll explore her distinctive path in the art world, confront her struggles with striving for perfection, and her reflections on aging and the transformation of the body. Get ready for an enlightening exploration into Emily's world, where every creation offers a window into self-discovery and rich introspective revelations. Emily, hi.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good.
Welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited. This is my first podcast.
Oh, amazing. Well, I am honored and very grateful that you've chosen to come on Artbeat with us. I would like to look backwards for a moment and have you reflect on how art played a part in your childhood and growing up.
This is a really good question. And it's funny because I think about I've always been making art. If I think back on my childhood and what I was doing in school and how I spent my time, it's one of the biggest consistencies that I've done in my life. I can pretty much close my eyes and see myself and feel myself sitting at my kitchen table in the house I grew up in, drawing away. I was obsessed with drawing. I think there was a period during university where maybe I slowed down a bit, but I've just always been drawing and making. It's just before the world of careers, what are you going to do with your life? It's just something I did. It was just something that really came naturally to me. And I think it's just something that I connected with that felt good for me.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like art has always been a part of your life and your art feels so personal. Can you tell us a bit about what it's like to see yourself reflected in your art?
For me, it's almost like freezing a moment in time. I think in some ways I'm kind of obsessed with time and being am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing something else? Time's going so fast, time is going so slow. And it's almost just freezing a moment and being able to reflect on that. I'll look at a piece and I can immediately see oh, I was listening to this audiobook and oh, I remember what I had for lunch that day. And oh my gosh, that was a horrible day because this and this happened. So they kind of end up being these memory keepers, I guess, but not necessarily reflected in what's being shown. But just for me, looking at them, I see all those moments. I think something about the connection to your hand. It's when they say studying for a test, to memorize something, you write it out a million times. And I think that kind of functions the same way for me. While I'm painting, it's I'm actively connected to what I'm experiencing. And I think it's interesting too, because I use my body a lot and bodies are always changing. So I look back on paintings I did a year ago and it's I couldn't paint the same painting because my body doesn't look like that anymore. So it's a process of accepting and letting go yourself within the making process, I guess.
It sounds like it puts you in a very vulnerable place to almost expose yourself through your art to others, to your viewers, and to those who you sell your paintings to. I'm curious, how do you tap into that vulnerability and how are you able to let go and paint yourself?
I was thinking about this a lot recently in that realm. Being an artist, it's kind of hard. And so much of it, you just kind of have to let go and accept what's happening. There's so many failures, but there's also so many wins too. And I think by I don't know, I don't even see it that way.
I was just going to see, what do you mean failures and wins?
I don't know how to describe what I was saying, but I just feel not disconnected to it, but I just really have to accept it. I can't worry too much about that. I think because my art is so focused on myself, and I think the only way to keep going is in some ways focus on yourself. And I hope that doesn't come across too narcissistic.
No, not at all.
If you just focus on yourself and worry what you're doing, you can't be too worried about what other people are thinking. I don't feel too vulnerable about it. And I think that's kind of why I always end up kind of painting my back or my view from my back, because it's this almost disassociative lens So like I'm staring at myself the same way I imagine anyone else would be staring at me. So as I'm looking at myself, I'm looking at it as the audience as well. But I'm more worried about how I feel. Yeah. I don't know. And I think too, and I was thinking about this too, the nudity is subtle. I think there's so many naked women portrayed in art since the dawn of time. So I'm kind of like numb to that angle, but it doesn't really feel like representation because it was never painted by the bodies that are being exposed. So I feel pretty confident in what I'm choosing to show.
Okay. Is there a particular reason that you're always painting like the view from your back?
Yeah, I think it's like I'm watching myself. And I was talking to someone about this recently. Like when you go back and look at your memories, what you did yesterday or last month, I'm almost watching it as if there's a camera in the corner of the room looking over my shoulder. How I kind of see my life in my mind's eye is almost from that position. So I'm kind of just, when I'm reflecting on what's happening currently or what's happened in the past, I'm kind of looking at it from that perspective.
And how do you choose which moments to paint?
This is really speaking to my work from 2022 and 2023. I feel like it was kind of a really cathartic release of like feelings that I've been holding on to for a while. And I'm actually pivoting a bit now. I feel like right now I'm focusing less on feelings, but this body of work was very feeling driven. So I keep a journal and there'll be certain ideas or experiences that I like ruminate on. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm writing the same thing over and over and over again. And I think it's those kind of things that you get like stuck on that end up being this loop in my mind and in my journal that I'm like, okay, well, how can I kind of explore this and push this? And like, for example, one of the things that I think was coming up a lot was this kind of skin crawling feeling, like just this overall unnerving discomfort I feel in like just existing in a body. And I feel like that's something I focused on. Well, how do I want to show that, you know? And so that's why I would focus on, I have my body, which we can all look at. And then how do I pair it with things to highlight these like phantom feelings that I can't necessarily like put into words and aren't necessarily there in the plane of reality that exists, but I'm trying to hint at that are there. You just can't see them.
That's fascinating and incredibly brave. Again, I feel like you're so vulnerable through your art and so expressive of what's inside. And like you just said, what's difficult to put into words. And I feel like so many of our listeners are able to relate to that. You mentioned that you're moving away from feelings in your art. What does that mean?
Right now, what I'm kind of working on, and it's catching me at a funny time where I feel like I'm starting a new chapter. And all of the work I just presented and did in the past year, they started with these feelings, like I was mentioning, and I kind of explored it from there. And then I worked from titles. But I'm almost approaching it from the different aspect. Like right now, I have a series of ideas and opinions, I suppose I'm trying to communicate. I think I'm moving from kind of this, sad's not the right word because it's not sad. It's, I don't know what it is really. To kind of, yeah, like something, there's some sort of like yearning for the void. But I think that the next series of work, and you know, it's so funny, they might end up looking very similar, but from where I'm coming from, like a mental perspective, they're a little more stubborn and angry. I don't know. We'll see.
I also feel that can be quite reflective for a lot of us listening. These are not easy times that we
know.
So it's interesting to hear how your work is very expressive of the human condition. What's happening to us all.
Well, I think that's the other thing too. When I started working, I always thought like, I really want to connect to other women and not speak for other women because I definitely don't speak for other women or all women. But what I realized is like, oh, I just need to like be as honest as I possibly can to my own experiences and to my own feelings. And hopefully from there, the connection is made.
And so you mentioned not being a part of the art world per se, and maybe not having that traditional journey of the conventional route. What has that been like for you? I want to know, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that you're not a part of the art world?
I think because I went to school, I did that thing where you're artistic, this is high school brain, you're artistic, but you can't, what is being an artist? I think especially coming from Canada, you hear this anecdotes, they're not good anecdotes, but Vincent van Gogh never sold a painting till he died. The starving artist trope and the crazy genius. And no one teaches you about the industry of it all. And I'm a practical person. So it wasn't even something I really even considered was a career path. And as I mentioned, I've just always been making art. So this is just something I do. So I went to school for environmental design, like the trajectory being architecture. And I ended up working the film business, doing graphic design and art direction, and just like continuing my painting journey. And I don't have the traditional education, so I don't have the traditional connections. And, I just existed on the internet and made connections from there. And most of what I've done has been international. So I don't really even know much about the Canadian art scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also too, you can speak on this and know more than I know, but from my understanding too, what the emerging landscape in Canada is a little more rigid right now in terms of bachelor, master's connection with a certain level of galleries versus I think internationally right now, there's more flexibility of picking up emerging artists that are kind of like working independently. And also too, I hope I don't come across that I'm anti-school or anti-intellectualism.
Not at all.
It's just not my path.
No, not at all. Do you feel that skipping that formal art education has shaped your approach to your art in any way?
I think it does, because I look back. So I did a Bachelor of Design. So we were taught so many things that we were taught as if they were facts, but they're opinions. And you're so malleable when you're in school and you go, okay, I guess that's the way it is. That's good design. And then you realize 5 years later, that's no longer in fashion. And I'm sure they're teaching things that are completely different. And so I feel like I'm so focused on fine-tuning that thing in my brain, what feels like good and true to me. When I'm working on an idea, like fine-tuning that like little switch, I don't know, like I picture it like a little meter where I'm like, is this honest? Like, is this good? Is this what I'm trying to say? Am I executing this the way I want to execute it? And like with every painting, you're kind of like fine-tuning that little thing in your brain, that gut feeling, I guess, or like trusting your instincts.
Your intuition.
Yeah, your intuition. And I think because my work speaks to that, I feel like I'm kind of doubling down by committing to that.
You talk a lot about your art, I think, being a glimpse into your inner world. And this might be not such a technical question in a way, but I want to hear, and I'm sure our listeners do too, how do you translate these internal visions onto canvas?
I think you have the starting out point, which for me, for the most part, is my body or personal objects. And then it's almost like creating a symbolic toolkit. And I'm not the first person to do this. So, having almost like a toolkit of what certain symbols mean to me and how I can like put them together like a little puzzle so they end up weaving what I'm trying to say. So, I think I paint pearls so often, and I think they're such a perfect little symbol because how a pearl is formed, you have a mollusk, an oyster, and some sort of irritant enters the body of it. And then they like secrete this thing. So it kind of protects itself by creating this protective covering over this little irritant. It's usually like a bacteria or a piece of sand. And the pearl is formed. I'm like, isn't that the perfect symbol of you have something come into your life or into your mind and you ruminate on it. You look at it from all different angles. You code it in different thought patterns, potential solutions, ideas, distractions, problem solving. Like, what are you going to do with this thing? And then you end up with the pearl or whatever you're dealing with, the outcome, the side effect of it all. And then I think there's something also kind of ironic about dealing with all these emotional angst, we can call it. And then you end up with these paintings. It's kind of the pearl, right? Like it's this pretty thing for consumption.
Do you ever struggle with perfecting a piece?
Oh, I think that might be my biggest struggle.
Yeah.
I think that might be my life's mission, to overcome my perfectionism. I have such, I guess you can call it a core memory of when I was a kid. I was drawing a face and I was drawing eyes, and at the time they were circles. And I realized eyes aren't circles. So I was like, okay, I gotta, bring them in the corners, work on that. And not being able to make the eyes symmetrical. Like I'm probably 5 or 6 years old, like kindergarten age, absolutely losing my mind that I can't make these two shapes the same. And I have to say, it's pretty similar to this. It's pretty similar experience in the studio, But I think what it is, it's this like deep frustration of having such a clear vision and image in your mind and having to figure out, like, how do I connect what's in my mind into my hand and put it on the canvas? That translation. And I feel like what I'm working on is almost this, like, not therapeutic, but this meditative flow of cycling out what's in my brain out of my brain. And I think that kind of speaks to, at the end of the day, I think most artists are creating because they want to be heard and seen on some level, like on a basic level. And I think it's like, I have all these clear images and thoughts in my mind. And then when I try to put them out, they're not so clear. And so it's like, how do I bring that out in clarity is, I think, where the perfectionism comes from.
Yeah, it sounds very frustrating. Like it can be very frustrating to not be able to coherently impart what you envision in your mind's eye onto something more permanent, like a canvas.
Yeah, it's kind of like you wake up in the morning and you had a dream that was so clear. Yeah. And you go to say it out loud and you're like, that doesn't make sense. Or no, you're just not understanding it. And then you go back in your brain, you're like, it makes sense. And you try to speak it out loud and you're like, that's not right. It's very similar, I think.
Do you feel like you might ever be able to let go? I want to explain where I'm coming from. Listening to what you're saying, I feel like there's a lot of intuition in conveying your thoughts and your memories and emotions. And then I hear this struggle with perfecting what you're painting. Where is the line between that intuition and allowing your intuition to just be on a canvas versus perfecting an edge, let's say, because of your...
That's a good question. I don't know. And I wonder if we talk in 20 years and maybe I figured it out and my paintings look, and my paintings look completely different. Sometimes I think I do a lot of drawing and I had a really busy year of painting and I kind of slowed down my drawing, but I'm always drawing and my drawings are a lot looser. I stopped sharing them too. And so they're really just for me. And I think I do try to have that for things to just be like, and this is once again from how I'm seeing it, like messy and incomplete and whatever. But I don't know. It's so hard. I think with the paintings, what I'm trying to focus on more too is in general, and I think this is true to everyone, you set these goals and you push so hard to achieve these goals. And then once you achieve the goal, you're left with a bit of a shrug feeling. Maybe I'm not, but it's hard to say. Like once you reach a goal, it's just what's the next thing I can do or what's my next goal? It's more of a, oh, okay, I did it. Sigh of relief next. And so I think I'm kind of focused on shifting my perspective and trying to have good days and like pull it back. So I guess in terms of shifting my perfectionism is like maybe focusing less on the outcome, but if while I'm creating the piece, because I really do enjoy being meticulous and careful. So if I can have a good day by being meticulous and careful, then hopefully the outcome will matter less, but the outcome will be closer to what I'm trying to achieve by focusing on the smaller end of things, which I think is true for everything. Like, I think you kind of have to focus on being happy in the moment without sacrificing things of the future.
When is a piece finished for you?
I think for me, it's like what I have in my mind. Once I get to that level where it's close, I think you do a couple things to the canvas where you end up being like, oh, I have to pull back. And once you end up doing more correction on the canvas of like, I should not have put that line there, or that is far too many highlights, wiping that away, which is the beauty of oil paint. It's so malleable and it's really not too permanent because you can always add another layer and always pull back, which I think is like a really nice feeling because nothing feels too dire. So I think once I start just, how can you really screw up a painting? But, you know, once I start screwing it up, trying to get back to where I was, I think that's the point you have to be, all right, it's done. And it's not really a matter of liking it because it's so funny. It's like, do any artists like the work they make?
That's
like,
a great question.
But it's so funny because it's like, I feel like it's a bit of a dirty little secret that no one really likes the work they make.
I
don't know.
Idea.
It's like a quiet conversation I have with people. You know, I see it. Can't believe I'm bringing up TikTok. You watch a TikTok video that this is my favorite painting I've ever made. This is my favorite. Oh, I love this painting. And I'm like, what? And then you ask your friends that are painters, like, do you like your work? And it's no. So I don't know if that's just me and my friends.
No. I love being brought into what I feel like is a circle right now.
Yeah.
Of something maybe that feels like a quiet part that not a lot of people really want to say out loud.
Yeah,
but it's there.
It is. And, you know, it's so hard because you can simultaneously not like a work, the piece you've made, but be proud of it and stand behind it. Because I also think that there's no way to progress in anything without being critical of it. If we liked what we were doing, then I would be drawing the same way I was drawing at 11 years old. So I think you always have to look at things with some sort of critical eye of like, was this what I wanted to do? Was this what I wanted to say? Okay, well, how am I going to change that? And it's not like a judgment. It's just part of it.
It reminds me of a quote. I'm probably not going to say it verbatim, but I feel like it more or less explains what you're expressing, which is the moment that you feel comfortable with your art, you're not really creating art anymore. It's so important to be uncomfortable with what you're doing.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. You really, I think you just have to kind of keep pushing yourself, you know, and yeah, I don't know, tap into something. I don't necessarily know what that something is, but you just have to hold some sort of vision and just like keep going, you know, like it's like I need to create because I need to express myself. I think that is something that everyone needs to do on some level. And whether it resonates with me or resonates with other people, that it is what it is, you know, just keep on keeping on.
Who do you paint for when you paint?
It's twofold because I think you really have to paint for yourself, and you really have to make work for yourself. And, by simultaneously, I think it's so hard to talk about in some ways because I think everything ends up sounding like a contradiction, but you have to make work that you're proud of and can stand behind, because what happens is when there are those low moments or failures or things don't go according to plan, you have to still be like proud of what you're doing. But I also feel really guided by just like connecting to, I don't know, like this body of women that exists throughout time in like the past, present, and future that like are all kind of operating in solitude and creating in solitude, and, at some level feel so alone. And I'm not a lonely person, but it's this like isolating mental scape, I suppose. And knowing that there's so many women and people that feel just mentally isolated or different or whatever, and knowing that, we can all exist and connect to each other's work. Like I've talked about her a lot in the past, but like, if I don't know if you've ever read Sylvia Plath's journals, but like they're, it's like, oh my gosh, like she was feeling the exact same way I'm feeling. And there's really something, something's comforting in that, being like, oh, the exact same way, you have these thoughts where you're like, I must be the only person that's ever thought this before. And then you realize that there's like thousands upon thousands of people.
Experience.
It is. It's very universal. So there is an element of like definitely wanting to like leave behind a body of work that like people can look at and be like, same, you know what I mean? And I don't need everyone to connect to my work, but it's like one of my paintings is in a room with 1,000 people and 999 people are like, I don't really get it. And then one person is like, oh, I get it. I see what you're saying. Like, I get it. Like, that it's good enough,
Do you ever experience, I'll say, creative block where you might be creatively drained, or are you constantly like not painting fast enough because you have so many ideas that you want to get out?
I think it's like a bit of an ebb and a flow. I prefer to work on one painting at once. And I really I love the feeling of like, you figured out what you want to do and you start painting. And paintings usually take me I'd say my average size is about 3 foot by 4 feet. And the first day, once I start painting, they usually take me about 10 days. And those are my favorite days of just actively working. And then when it comes to it almost feels like within thought pattern of creating the next painting, that's almost where the creative rut happens, in these small mini cycles, So it's I'll finish a painting and be like, okay, well, what am I trying to say next? Or sometimes I like to work, I wouldn't call it a series, but paintings that fit together. So what I'm trying to communicate is more clear. I have 3 paintings where the first image is the side of my body leaning on a misshapen pearl, which is kind of the representation of that kind of that tension in your body, or that old thought pattern. And then the next painting that goes with it is the figures on their back. I'm on my back. And so it's my stomach with a bunch of small pearls. So that one big thing has broken up, you've dissipated it. You've kind of clearing it out, but it's still there. And then the next painting is this big glass shell with a glass pearl. So it's kind of you have this trauma, physical, mental, whatever, you work on breaking it apart and you get rid of it, but it's still there in some ways, a memory of it. So it's kind of the body remembers everything, the body holds on to things, your mind kind of cycles on things.
I wanted to touch on, because earlier you mentioned aging and you mentioned about how when you paint yourself as a reference, your body changes over time and you're painting a different body. How do you feel about that?
It's interesting, and I think of it like, wouldn't it be cool if, every year from now until, I always joke, I'm going to live till 107 years old. So I've just committed to living 107 years old.
I believe you.
Right? So from now until I'm 107, if I have like one kind of painting and let's say the back, and I keep painting it, or like I paint hands in almost all my paintings. And it's like, I've already noticed my hands are changing. Like I have this one vein in the center of my hands that's like so much stronger than it used to be. And it's like, it's only going to get deeper, and I think in some ways it's kind of nice because you're kind of separating yourself from like the aesthetics of like having a body because you're putting it on canvas. So I think it's so interesting to like see over time, watching it transform, because I think, existing in the world, like, you're beaten with a stick on your head thinking that like women have an expiration date, and I think it's only getting worse. It's like, after 30, or like, it's all
30.
Yeah, it's all downhill from there. And, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? You just have to accept it. And I think through painting, I've accepted it, and I don't know if I've accepted it in my walking around life, but in art, I've accepted it. And I think, what else can I do? Yeah. So it's tricky. It's tricky. This one's a tricky one for me because I can't speak to everybody, And
I'm wondering too, you were talking earlier about how the body holds trauma. How, I think this also relates to how we were talking earlier about being able to convey in the way that you want to convey what's in your mind's eye onto the canvas. But how do you capture those complex, hard to explain emotions in your art?
I think scale is a big thing, making work that's like quite large. So it's a little bit in your face, and making really purposeful compositions. So you're kind of forcing the audience to look at this one thing, and so it's not just, so there's like not a lot of things to unpick like that, it's like that is one section of the stomach, so you're forced to be like, what's happening on that one section of the stomach? And it's like, why is there so much tension in the hands? And then like I'll add details like little beads of water that obviously weren't there, but it's like, what is that trying to point towards or, communicate? Or it's like, oh, like, I've kind of felt like that before, like, that kind of feeling. So I think it's just almost kind of directing the gaze, really, like directing the gaze of like what I'm trying to show.
I'm curious to hear like how your journey of personal identity has been mirrored in your art over the years. And you can go back as young as childhood, but just curious how that journey has shown up in the art that you produce.
Well, I think in general, like I've always been very good at fitting in, and like doing what I thought was perceived as the right thing, like not going to art school, like going to design school to get a sensible job, or just, that's making sure my hair looks like everyone else's hair, or, making sure I'm wearing the right thing and saying the right thing. And I don't know if any of that stuff ever really came naturally to me, but I am very good at it, I think. Maybe I'm not. But, and I think, you kind of reach a breaking point of where you're like, I don't really feel like I'm being myself, or I don't really feel like I'm expressing how I'm actually feeling. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say, like, it's like, here I am is kind of what the paintings are saying. Like, so you have like one the physical body. Like, here I am. This is the truth. It's that simple. And then you add all these elements that are kind of saying like, oh, well, there's more than what I'm just seeing if I was looking at you in the flesh, you know? So it's just kind of like a invitation to look a little closer.
From your pieces over the years, has there been a singular piece or maybe even a series that is particularly close to you in that you wouldn't want to sell it, you wouldn't want to get rid of it? And I'm interested to hear the story behind it.
I actually have a piece. I made it in 2019, and it doesn't look like any of the work I'm making now, but it was, I think, kind of the first piece I did. I took a break from, because I was working in film, and I took a break after a show, and I went to Portugal, and I was like, I need some time to paint, and I rented an apartment and just painted from the apartment. I feel like it was like a really it was a painting that I was like, I'm going to make bigger work, and I'm going to explore and test new things. And it was like, I think probably the most sentimental thing for me, because it felt like such a turning point in how I wanted to live my life moving forward. And I ended up, it's in to my best friend's house. So
so nice.
I feel like, you know, I did, when I signed with the gallery in Hong Kong, before I had done kind of like a studio sale to like clear out a bunch of work. And I put that up in the studio sale, and I was like, it kind of like did a little ping. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to let this one go, which is like rare for me, because like I was saying, it's such a cathartic experience. But I was like, this one, I was like, I don't know about it. And yeah, one of my best friends reached out. She's like, we want this one. So it's in their living room. So I can't look at it. I can't. It's funny. I have a hard time looking at my old work.
Okay, so you're represented by a gallery in Hong Kong. You just finished a solo show there. Tell us a bit about what that was like, and did it feel any different from, you know, perhaps having your art in Canada, and if there were any differences that you felt?
You know, it's so hard to say, because it's like I was mentioning earlier, like I'm just right now I'm at a point where I'm just focused on like having good days, because, you know, you do these things, and I wasn't able to go to Hong Kong. So for me, it's just something like that, like existed online,
right?
You know, so I feel so cut off from it. But, you know, it's, of course, like you hear like reception and all that kind of stuff in sales. So you have to like be proud of yourself and in those regards. But yeah, I don't know. I had my group show in London, Pictorium Gallery, and I was actually able to go for that. And it was really nice to like, you know, I paint out of a basement. So I literally spend so much of my time alone in a basement. And which I do like it, but you know, you kind of sometimes you're like, what am I doing? So to, you know, all of a sudden, you know, be in a space with like your work and other people, it's like, there is something really gratifying about that. And it like, I think it like helps put you like, okay, like I'm going to keep going. Like I'm going to, you know, cause it's like people are connecting to what I'm doing, and I'm going to try to connect to what I'm doing, and I'm just going to keep going. So that's helpful. But, you know, at the same token, I think I would love to start working with the gallery in Toronto, because I want that kind of to be like present and connected to my work. And this, like, I grew up in the Junction, and now I live more downtown, and I'm going to live here and stay here. So I would love that. So we'll see.
Have a bit more of connection to the Canadian art scene.
Yeah. But, you know, I don't really, the contemporary figurative painting, I don't see it being a super big thing in what's happening in the art scene in Toronto.
What do you see happening in the art scene here?
I see a lot of sculpture and installation, and I see a lot of abstraction. Yeah, I don't know how much my work fits in here, when I would love to be proven wrong. I would really love to be your
superpower.
Yeah.
Charting your own course.
Yeah.
In the Canadian art world, and maybe not, we'll say, fitting into the current, I don't want to say trends, fitting into
it's true though.
Yeah, currently the latest and greatest. Which, tides change, right? The pendulum swings. So
yeah, exactly. And you have to, that's the other thing, is like, you really have to focus on what you want to do and what you want to say, because if you're going with the trends, like, where's the stability in that, And of course you end up being influenced by, what's happening around you, like culturally, and what other people are doing. But you really have to be, I think, rooted in what you're trying to say and do and express, because
I feel like
otherwise it's a flash in the pan.
No, and that's a really great point. I feel just like a good film art is very transparent, and viewers of art, I feel like they would be able to sense any disingenuine, feelings that the artist is putting out there. And they'd be able to discern that this isn't as genuine or authentic as it should be.
It's so interesting. I totally agree. And sometimes, like, you can almost kind of see, and I wonder if you can too, when there'll be a certain aesthetic, I want to call it, that seems to be like popular. And you can kind of feel when someone is like, if that's kind of the aesthetic that flows from them versus it's a look that they're copying from others. Mm-hmm. I just, I feel like you can kind of tell. I don't know.
So if you could change one aspect of the Canadian art scene, what would it be?
And I think this almost applies to all art scenes, but I wish there was a little more, I guess, transparency, because I think, it's just the way in terms of like communication works. Like, you're not supposed to just email a gallery out of the blue, and you have to kind of wait for them to come to you. Like, so you just have to, it's like, that's kind of a bizarre thing, when at the end of the day, it should be a 50-50 relationship, And I think in general, I just wish there was like, not a rule book, but just more openness, I guess. But, you talk to everyone, and everyone's experience and story is like completely different. So it's really hard to say, but I don't know. I hope things, I think that's all it is. I wish there was like a little more transparency.
Mm-hmm. So what is next for you? What are you working on now that maybe you can share with our listeners? What do you want to do in the near future? Any upcoming exhibitions that you can share? What can you tell us?
Last year, I had a very full plate, and I think I bit off a lot, not more than I can chew, but I ended up really having to hustle to get everything I needed to get done. And this year, I'm kind of focusing on turning further inwards, if that's even humanly possible. And I think too, a lot of my work, I kind of was like looking at almost like as a body of work. And I think I'm kind of shifting, and I want to treat each painting way more as like individual painting, which I think will give me a little more freedom to like shift gears as I go. Mm-hmm. And, I think you're going to see more glass paintings from me. I think it is so fun to paint. And I think, you really have to focus on the things that you enjoy doing, because you're doing it for so long. So I love painting glass. Like, it's so fun. Like, painting highlights is the best, and glass is almost all highlights. So I think you'll see more glass for me.
Emily, where can our listeners find your work?
you can find me on my website, which is www.emilypope.ca. And I'm on Instagram, which is EEEPOPE. And yeah, you can reach out to me through email, through DMs. I love talking. I think one of my favorite things is when other artists reach out to me just to like chat or ask my opinion. You end up having like some of the best conversations that way, or, revealing, juicy details of things that are happening that you didn't know, which are very useful tools. Gossip is a very useful tool. And I'll be posting for any updates, and I look forward to hearing from you and your listeners.
Well, we really look forward and very excited to see what you do this year. And thank you.
Thank you. This is really fun. It was nice to chat.
Thank you for joining us on Artbeat, where the stories of Canadian art come to life. Follow us on Instagram at Artbeat Podcast for exclusive content and previews of what's to come. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to stay updated with our journey through the world of Canadian art. Enjoyed the episode? Leave a review or recommend us to a fellow art enthusiast. Together, let's keep the conversation going and deepen our connection to the diverse world of Canadian art. See you next time.